Why do these people treat Trump rallies and events like Grateful Dead concerts or diehard sports fans? So there's one dude in there spending over $50,000 a year going to Trump rallies. And people feel like if you're going to put your neck out there, if you're going to fight for us, we'll fight for you. We'll show up for you.
Our founding fathers here in this country brought about the idea that you and I have within ourselves the God-given right and the ability to determine our own destiny. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same. Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction.
If we look back to the Founding Fathers, they understood many things, and their foresight has gotten us to where we are today. But they also understood that to safeguard our freedoms, we need a free press. Because of mainstream media today, we've seen the rise in independent journalists. So here to talk about a bit of independent journalism, the Press Corps, his new documentary, his best-selling author, host of the Sean Spicer Show, and former White House Press Secretary, Sean Spicer.
Thanks for having me here.
Of course. So let's jump straight into it. I watched your documentary the other day about the Front Row Joes. Tell us a little bit about it, then we'll jump into a couple questions.
Okay. So I've been doing campaigns for 30 years. I did my first one in 1994, believe it or not. And the thing that was so unique about the Trump campaign was these loyal followers. I mean, you bump into people who've been around the campaign for a while, and they kind of describe them as deadheads, that, you know, the kind of the folks who followed the Grateful Dead or super fans or anything else. But these folks literally went from rally to rally, event to event, some of them 40, 50, one guy 80 events. And so I was talking to some folks from the Trump campaign, from the 2016 campaign a couple of years back, and we were talking about how unique this is. If you've ever been involved in a campaign, normally, like if you're having a big event, you would say like, okay, Friday night, we're going to be doing a rally at the fairgrounds, and you send out mail and maybe, you know, make phone calls and send digital ads or whatever. And that's how you would get a crowd to show up for your political event. Well, Trump sends out a tweet back in the day. Now it's a truth. And tens of thousands of people show up. But more importantly, like these group of Front Row Joes would just go from event to event to event. And they would build their lives around these things. They would show up 3-4 days early, sleep in the back of their car. They would want to be first every time. And so in these conversations, I said to some of the folks, God, if this isn't documented, no one's going to ever A, appreciate it, or B, write about it as part of history. And everyone kind of looked at me and said, well, then you're the guy to do it. And so I set out for 2 years to follow these folks, the Front Row Joes, to sit down with President Trump at Mar-a-Lago and talk to him about it. We sat down with Steve Bannon and Marjorie Taylor Greene, and we were talking about, what is this movement? Why do these people treat Trump rallies and events like Grateful Dead concerts or diehard sports fans? And we really sought to answer that question, like what makes these guys tick? And it was amazing to hear the different reasons and what they're doing with their lives. And I mean, one guy you saw the documentary, there's one dude in there spending over $50,000 a year going to Trump rallies.
Mm-hmm. And when the thing that really caught my attention when I was watching it, I haven't been to a Trump rally yet. I live in Delaware, Joe Biden's home state. He's only been here once. That was back in the 2016 campaign, back when I was like 12. I didn't even know he came at that time. So I'm still waiting for that, waiting for him to come to Delaware.
I don't know that you're going to get it, Christian. I hate to tell you. I think Delaware's a lost cause right now.
I don't know. We don't have mail-in ballots anymore and a couple things like that. There's a chance that he carries it. But even then, I've seen him speak at CPAC and a couple other events.
By the way, just real quick, you guys still don't have mail-in ballots in Delaware?
We had them, and then our state GOP chair sued Julianne Murray and got rid of them. The court sided with her and said they're unconstitutional. We don't even have early voting.
It's funny that the one that of all the states that doesn't have mail-in ballot, the president's own state doesn't have it.
Yeah, it's a bit odd, isn't it? Should do that everywhere. If we can do it here. And Trump loves that. Julianne's talked to him multiple times. I'd really encourage that we possibly could carry it if it's really a landslide. But even when we're going to these events and Secret Service is there hours before, snooping out the whole building, people are lined up for hours, days, just camping at like CPAC just to get in line, get there early. Look at like Reagan's support back in the day. We thought that was something. Then we got to Obama. We thought that was really impressive. Now we're here to Trump. Why are people so passionate about Trump's rallies, Trump's events? Why do they really believe in Trump, do you think?
I think it's because he's willing to fight for issues that everyone else in the past on a bipartisan way has given up on. And people feel like if you're going to put your neck out there, if you're going to fight for us, we'll fight for you. We'll show up for you. You think about it, issue after issue, from moving the embassy to Jerusalem to renegotiating NAFTA, it was always, oh, we can't do this. And Trump said, why not? I'll do it. I'll fight for it. Most politicians would have given up on Brett Kavanaugh during that nomination process. He doesn't. And for so many people in America, they feel like Washington and most politicians have given up on them. And I think that they get the sense that, hey, this guy's different. He's willing to fight for us, and I'll fight for him then.
No, that's a great way to put it. I think Trump is really the epitome of the title of my book, America, Don't Give Up. He hasn't given up on us, so why are we giving up on him in this cycle? But another thing, you mentioned a couple times throughout the documentary, the question of what's next after Trump. Does the MAGA movement continue? Does someone replace America first? What happens after Trump?
Well, you've seen it. And by the way, for people who are looking, you can go to salemnow.com. Salemnow.com is where you can see Trump's Front Row Joes. This is the documentary that we're talking about. I think we ended the documentary with that question for that exact reason. Where does it go? What and you saw, not to give it away, but I don't think that there's any secret. I think some people think, well, I'm going to continue to fight for Trump as long as he's alive and kicking. And I do think that he'll probably keep doing rallies and things like that. Some people wonder if Don Jr. runs for office. And I mean, we saw Barron stand up the other day to rally. Mm-hmm. Maybe he becomes the new standard bearer. Maybe some other candidate. I don't know. And I think that's the $1 million question. All of these people who've given up their lives that drive to Trump rallies, and that's, again, the focus of this documentary. Trump's Front Row Joes, where do they go? You saw this theme over and over again of becoming a family. So where does the family go? Because I don't know that everyone's going to agree. Right now, they all agree that Trump's the guy. Mm-hmm. I don't know that they all agree on that in the future, though.
Yeah, that's the $1 million question that I've talked to a bunch of my friends about. Some who are supporting DeSantis in the primary, Vivek in the primary, and now we're all behind Trump. They're asking the question, if Trump picks a VP who's going to be his predecessor, who's going to succeed him, or if he's going to pick someone who's just going to steady the ship, like a Ben Carson, until 2028, so we can debate that in the primary. What do you think that he's going to do for VP? What's his best angle there?
The best angle for Trump is to pick somebody that he believes has his back. It's not, he said it best the other day on Hannity when he said, it's not someone that is bringing something to the ticket per se. I think he's got to feel like they're a partner, that they're in it, that they buy into the agenda, that they're willing to go out there and fight for the agenda and sell it for those America First policies. And I don't think there's a bad pick. I honestly look down that list of people that are being considered. And by the way, I'm also I've known Trump too long, but I believe that there's somebody that's on that list that we're not talking about, or maybe two. But I haven't heard a name that's been seriously floated by him, like not by others, but by him or his team, that I wouldn't be comfortable with.
Mm-hmm. So you said the most loyal. Would you say that's Ben Carson? Would you say it's Tim Scott? Would you say it's Vivek, Tulsi Gabbard? The names thrown out there. Who would you say is the most loyal?
All, just so we're clear, I mean, I don't see Tulsi Gabbard. I honestly don't see. Like, I get why everybody's enamored with her to some extent, but she's not a Republican. And I think I just, again, not that I'm glad that Tulsi's had this conversion, but she's not a Republican yet, at least. And there's some issues that are of concern. I don't think that you bring the latest person over, right? So that's number one. Number two, with all due respect to Vivek, he's not in the mix. He's not been put on any of the Trump lists. I think the top three are Burgum, Rubio, and Vance. That's where I think that things stand. And like I said, I have this belief that maybe it's Lee Zeldin or somebody else, but there's a dark horse that we're not talking about. But if I had to rank them, that's where I'd put it. But that's just,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where Trump's head is, but I don't think a Tulsi or a Vivek, and it's not me. I mean, I'm not trying to get your audience all fired
Yeah.
up or anything. That's what they're saying. I mean, like,
Mm-hmm.
people will come at me sometimes and say, who would make a great vice president? I'm like, great. You're making it the case to the wrong guy. I don't pick. So,
Yeah. I agree with you on Tulsi and Vivek. I don't not really know why people are tossing Tulsi Gabbard's name in there. Even when she was second highest up in the DNC, close to when she came over to the other side, it was just a U.S. congressman as a Democrat a few years ago. And then Vivek, possibly a spot of the cabinet. I think he's got a couple other ideas in the private sector that he would be more beneficial in. But when you look at the press corps under Joe Biden today, what's your perspective? Because you served under the Trump press corps. You're the press secretary towards the beginning of the administration. Do you think they're going a lot softer on Joe? What do you think?
I don't think, to be honest with you, it's a question of like what I think, or I think for every person out there, go watch any press conference that I oversaw, in the briefing room that I oversaw, and watch anyone that you want during the Biden presidency. Psaki, KJP, you take a pick. And you tell me whether or not it's different. They don't hold them accountable. They don't ask tough questions. And I mean, I think that's an objective critique of where things are. It's not my critique. I don't think anybody who's got eyes can look at the environment, the tone, the questions that are asked at any press conference and compare it with my tenure versus any one of them during Biden, and you will see that there's a sharp difference.
There really is a sharp difference. And even KJP calling out cheap fakes just to get out of a question. I mean, she just lies her way through every press conference, it seems like. And even when Ducey asks a typical soft question compared to what you got of the Trump administration, she just tries to wiggle her way out. Do you think that's been strategic by the Biden administration? Do you think they're holding back each of these journalists? What goes on behind the scenes that can put us in a situation we're at today?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, you have to understand that the journalists themselves are on that team. They're not going to ask a tough question because they don't want to do anything to harm an administration that they're supportive of. So that's the first. I mean, they can ask any question, right? She gives her a little spiel. They can ask and follow up anything they want. They choose not to. They choose to overlook the misstatements and the contradictory statements and the falsehoods because they want to. They could ask a question, they could do a story. They choose not to because they're on the team. Over and over again, this administration says things that are patently not true, and yet there's no accountability held. This last couple weeks has been sort of like this exercise, like they pretend that they haven't been there. They're like, oh my God, he is, he's ailing, he's aged so much. Like, dude, you guys have had a front row seat for 3 years, and it's just because everyone else finally saw it that now you actually have to report on it. Had that debate not occurred, they wouldn't be writing stories, questioning. In fact, to your point about cheap fakes, think about this. The Wall Street Journal did a story the other day that touched on it, and the White House and the press corps eviscerated them and saying that it was out of line, it was out of so any attempt to call that out a couple of weeks ago was out of bounds. Now it's, they're all piling on because they couldn't deny what everyone saw.
Yeah, and ever since that debate, we've seen a weird shift that they are attacking Biden in the media, even on CNN right after the debate. And they are hammering Biden for his performance. Do you think we're going to start seeing that come into the press room, into those briefings?
Well, I think, again, there's an aspect of they feel like once everybody has sort of seen behind the curtain, now they have to do something about it because it's like, God, we can't hide it anymore. That's number one. Number two is that I feel like some of these things, they feel like KJP has not been straight with them. And it's kind of like lying to a coworker or to a family member. They're like, hey, we're on the same team. Like, why didn't you tell us? And that's
Mm-hmm.
where I think that the issue really kind of came about, is that for a lot of these guys, they feel betrayed by the White House. And that's the one thing that for a lot of folks in the press corps, they won't tolerate is, hey, don't treat us like we're on your team. We're family. I mean, KJP used to work at MSNBC. Her partner, Suzanne Malveaux, is a correspondent for CNN. Now, I think they did break up or something, but I mean, like, they truly are all a big family.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that betrayal is going to turn into the tougher questions in the briefing? Or as you're saying, they're still not going to turn against Biden because they are family? What do you
Well,
think?
I think for this current issue on the age and the acuity and the doctor, maybe, but you notice they're not talking about policy, right? So they've never touched the fact that, like, when Biden said during the debate that no soldiers have died on his watch, that's patently false. 13 people died in that failed, botched Afghanistan withdrawal. No one called him out on it. No one's calling him out on the border, right? So the policies themselves, they're not touching. It's just issues where they feel like they have to do something, i.e., the age and acuity issue, because, well, everybody saw it, so we now can't deny that it happened or not report on it. But to the extent that the issues that matter, they're on Team Biden, and they're not going to do anything to undermine that agenda, because they know that that even if Biden's not the nominee at some point, that the next person will be on board on that agenda, and therefore they need to protect the agenda.
That's a good point to make. Do you think they're going to get Biden out on the mental acuity? Do you think they're going to invoke the 25th? If so, what's the timeline, do you think, behind the scenes?
So look, I'm a believer that he is, I mean, like, as he stated, in fact, as President Trump stated in the interview with Hannity the other night, he's the nominee. He owns these delegates. They are his. So as long as he stays in the race and digs in his heels, there's no discussion, right? The 25th Amendment is not going to be invoked. They're not going to screw themselves, okay? It's not going to happen. And frankly, I think from the right, we should not want it to happen. We know Biden. I've made this analogy before, Christian, but I feel like it's the best one I can. Like, if you know the batter that's up to bat has never hit the ball, can't hit the ball, right? Why would you want to go face the DH, even if they don't have a great batting record either, right? So always face the batter that you know best. And we know Biden, and we know his record. We know what he's done for 3 years. And so my opinion is we stay with it and stay with him. But to your question about whether he will, it's all up to him. Now, let's kind of run through the timeline. So the Democrats have to virtually nominate Biden. Why? Because they don't own a calendar, and they forgot about the Ohio ballot deadline. So they have to nominate him by August 7th, weeks before their convention. So they're going to have this virtual roll call of their delegates to nominate Biden and make him the official nominee. There's talk they might move it up before August 7th, just to put it in. Once he becomes the nominee, it's game over. It's locked in. It's done. Because then what happens is that's a legally binding thing. Then he gets placed on the ballots. And in the next month, especially till about September 10th to 15th, once you're on the ballot, you're on the ballot. Like, you can't go in and replace him. Military and overseas ballots have to get sent out, and early voting starts. And so he's got about a month. And then once that's done, it's over. But the ballot deadline for Ohio is August 7th. So there is not a lot of room to maneuver. Now, you could argue that the Dems aren't going to win Ohio, so if they miss that deadline, is it horrible? No, they're not going to win Ohio. But then you start to peel back the onion about some of the other states that are coming up, and they in short order, they all start happening. August 23rd, I think, is Alabama. So you're going to lose some ballots sooner rather than later in terms of access and getting your name on it. They've got to be careful about that, and that's why the window to do anything is relatively short.
I'm glad you pointed that out, because I saw your video you made the other day where he talked about invoking the 25th. Why Republicans shouldn't be pushing for that, because we know the enemy, and we know if we're facing Biden in this election, it's almost a surefire Trump victory at this point. If things stay the same and continue progressing on the same trajectory that they're on. But with the timeline, haven't a couple states have already passed? I think Wisconsin was one. If I think correctly, there's been 3 or 4 states that have already passed where he's already on the ballot there and he can't get off.
No, because he's not the
No?
nominee. The first one is
Okay.
Ohio. That's August 7th. So that's why they have to do what they have to do. But and once you become the nominee, then it's official, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's the convention isn't just a big party. There's actually some legal aspects to this that make you the nominee, and by virtue of becoming the nominee, you get ballot access, right? Because you are the Republican or Democratic nominee, and so that's important for them. Now, some states automatically, they guarantee it, so they'll say by virtue of you becoming the nominee, you get this, and that's but the clock is ticking on these guys and they know it. And that's why Biden's also kicking in his heels and saying, I am the nominee. I sent the letter. I let you all know I'm not going anywhere. And there's nothing they can do about it unless he personally says, okay, I agree.
Mm-hmm. And the DNC convention is August 19th through the 22nd, I believe, in Chicago at the
Yep.
Hyatt Regency. So August 7th, and then 2 or 3 weeks until the convention. We're looking at the RNC convention next week. What are you looking out for? Anything we should be watching for that's going to happen there with Trump being nominated? What's the process behind the
So
scenes?
it's at this point, it's pretty much like, especially on his side and frankly on both sides, by the time you get to the convention, it's locked in, right? So we're going to pass the platform, officially adopt that. There's some party business that gets done. Then Wednesday night, the vice presidential nominee gives their speech and becomes the official nominee. And Thursday night, Trump becomes the official nominee and locks that
Mm-hmm.
in. And that's it. And then they literally go backstage and sign papers. And the papers certify that the party has nominated them. There's some campaign finance aspects of that. It allows them to access general election funds. So in a campaign, you can raise, roughly 3,000 for the primary and for the general. Once you become the nominee, you can access that additional 3,000. You get the ballot access. So there's some stuff that goes along with that, legally speaking, and that's important to understand. So that's it's on cruise control, if you will, on both platforms, because
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that this isn't 1968 or anything where the delegates matter and there's actually, like, it's the incumbent or the nominee in Trump's case control the process. They've got their people involved. The parliamentarians been cued into, like, hey, don't accept any motions from the floor. This is a well-oiled machine that processes from Wednesday to Thursday, all very scripted. It's basically a show,
Mm-hmm.
where certain business gets done and then certain speakers highlight things. But you saw this during the COVID thing. It literally became a scripted show.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. I got one final question here, a mini question I ask everyone at the very end. If you could tell America or my generation, Gen Z, one thing not to give up, what would it be?
Hope.
Hope.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think too many people, when I talk to them about politics, saying, I've given up, the party. And I've always told people, like, look what happened after COVID. People saw what was going on in schools, and they ran for school board, and they're changing things. They saw what their kids were learning and went in and talked to the teachers. And my point is, it only it won't change if we give up. And if you have hope and say, I can make a difference, I'll run. I mean, I had some people that I knew that were pissed at the party and ran for local county party positions, etc., and won. If you want to make change happen, have hope and go out there and do something about it. But sitting back and just throwing up your hands and saying, I won't do it. Getting back to the point of this, right? The Front Row Joe's movie, if you go to salemnow.com, you can watch it, you can give it, you can buy the DVD. But this is a group of people that had been given up and they had hope in Trump. And now they're literally going from rally to rally to rally because they have hope in the future of the country and hope in what President Trump will do for them.
And that's a great way to put it. If we everyone wants the change, nobody wants to be the change. We've got to get involved more than ever before today. Sean, where can we find your show? Where can we find you on social media? All of that good stuff.
So the show, just if you go to SeanSpicer.com, it's got it all there. But look, the show is every night at 6 o'clock on YouTube and Rumble, Apple Podcasts. You can get it there, or Spotify. Sean Spicer Show has it. SeanSpicer.com can link to everything. And then the movie, the Front Row Joe's movie, is at SalemNow.com.
Okay. Sean, thanks for joining us today. Appreciate your time.
You bet, Christian. Thank you.